Okay, good evening, folks, and welcome to our workshop for April 27th, 2020. We'll start today with our ag solar presentation. Mr. Cousins and Miss Norwood. Are they on? Oh, here we go. Miss Norwood?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Welcome. Mr.
Thanks.
Cousins? Okay, we are live and the floor is yours.
All right. So as you know, City Council recently approved a solar energy generating systems ordinance that allows these types of projects in the industrial district. We've been receiving inquiries from developers interested in properties in the ag zone. So the planning board's been working on an amendment to the current ordinance to also include some agriculture specific standards. There's a lot of differences, as you know, between the industrial district and the ag zone. So the planning board's really been tasked with creating additional standards that balance preserving agriculture uses while also enabling landowners to take advantage of this land use that could potentially benefit them. So there's a little bit of a push to try and get an ordinance in place for developers to get on the June 9th planning board agenda. The PUC has a deadline in July for approved shovel-ready projects. And just to give you a little bit of background information, last year, the legislature passed a clean energy package. It's looking to add 375 megawatts of power through projects that are generally less than 5 megawatts. So 5 megawatts would be the cap for those projects for commercial, industrial, and community use. Excuse me. The developers would enter into 20-year contracts and they would sell the energy through CMP. So there's 5 rounds for these 375 megawatts. Each are about 20% of the total megawatts. So this first round would be 50 megawatts for community shared type of projects, and then 25 megawatts for commercial industrial projects. And we have a project right now that's looking at a community shared project. And just to break down the math, it would be a total of about 15 projects that they would be approving this first round. So we're really hoping that the planning board will approve a final draft of the ordinance at the May 12th meeting so that the city council can have a first reading on May 18th. And the ordinance that you have in your packets, it lists out some recommendations for standards from the Conservation Commission and responses to those recommendations that were made by the planning board at the last April meeting. We've been using the recommendations to come up with some language, some language to create an ordinance that would help kind of incorporate all of the suggestions that were made by the planning board and the Conservation Commission. And a lot of the hot topic items, I guess, that we've had as part of this ordinance have been the total land area. So how much of the ag zone should be allocated towards these solar projects. And then the second one that's really been a hot topic item for the planning board has been prime soils. So a lot of planning board members feel that, well, I don't say a lot, maybe some planning board members feel that prime soils shouldn't be considered at all for these types of solar projects. And then others feel as though they could be considered as long as the projects meet some specific criteria. And the other item that's been kind of tossed around a little bit are standards for clearing. So some members feel that clearing could actually be beneficial because land right now could be forested and the farmers perhaps couldn't afford to clear the land. So it may actually open up some farmland in the future that they could utilize. And then the other argument has been what if we allow clearing and then all of a sudden we're getting uses in there that we don't want. So those have been the really hot button items, I guess you could say, that the planning board's been going through. So just wanted to have you take a look at this. I know we don't have too much time, but any thoughts that you have on the direction the Planning Board and Conservation Commission are headed would be greatly appreciated. So thank you for your time.
I'm sorry, Council, just we're at workshop, so if you have anything for just let's throw it out there. Go, Councilor Rosanian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions. One kind of an overarching question about the Ag Committee. It seems that it would be really important to have the Ag Committee in place and able to look at these applications coming through. And without an Ag Committee, I'm really concerned that there won't be that eye on all of this that could actually speak to things like prime soils, erosion protection for surrounding properties, and also the change of landscape, in terms of tree removal. So I feel very strongly that the Ag Committee should be in place. And I know that we've got a really aggressive schedule on this. I understand that. But that's why we should have a really aggressive schedule in terms of putting the Ag Committee together so that they can review this. I think their input is going to be extremely important. Thank you.
Okay, duly noted. I will say that Ag Committee by the charter, by the ordinance that we accepted or approved, did not make them into adjudicating power with regards to land use. So I'm not sure it would be completely relevant, but I'll research that and see if there's any relevance here.
It's not adjudicating, it's recommending, which is what their role is.
Okay, I'll look at it. I honestly, from a logistics standpoint, I do not think there's enough time to get this Ag Committee spooled up, and bring yet another committee in. We did have, and we did allow the Conservation Commission to meet on this while all other committees were not meeting in order to support the Planning Board in their actions. I reviewed everything in detail, and honestly, I thought that the back and forth was important. I saw what the Conservation Commission recommended, and I saw some of the very thoughtful comments by both parties. I do think it's been covered. I will note that solar is not permanent. The biggest thing we have to look at when we're doing solar is to make sure there is a disconnection or discontinuance policy, which this ordinance covers pretty well, not just at the end of life cycle, but also on stages throughout the build out. For example, I believe, and Mr. Norcross, correct me if I'm wrong, if the product has been approved but has not taken shape or completed within 24 months, then the approval can be revoked, correct?
Correct. Yep. And I believe the Planning Board changed that. I think they changed it to 12 months, if I'm not mistaken.
I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, but it's unfortunate the Ag Committee is not in place and should have been by this time to be able to look at this.
Okay, duly noted. Is there any other comments on this, on solar energy?
I just have a couple of quick questions. Is there anything stopping someone in the ag zone from clear cutting all of their ag property right now and making it a field?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to check that. And I like how the language is written in here for most of it. The only couple sticking areas I have would be the total land use, because I would hate for us to clear cut our entire ag zone. But I do understand the benefit of having solar, and depending on how we define prime soil in here, could penalize landowners just based on the fact that they happen to own land that's prime soil within their 100 acres. So depending on how we define that. But I think overall it was a good step in the right direction, allowing the setbacks. So I'm for most of this. I would question how much of the ag zone we're comfortable moving to solar as an alternative energy, which is great, but not if we're going to do 80% of our ag zone into solar all of a sudden and tie up that land for 20 years.
Well, let's dig into that one, Councilor Boss. We'll come back to that question, Councilor McLeod, too. But Councilor Boss?
Sure.
Thank you. I have a similar question. I'm also wondering, too, about overall, if we are now allowing large solar operations in the industrial zone and also in the ag zone, if this passes, aren't we incentivizing developers to move toward looking at ag zone land, considering how much less it costs, not only to buy, but also to lease? And is that something that we're interested in doing? And I think that tags on to then Councilor McLeod's question about what percentage of the overall ag zone are we interested in having in solar, because we know that people are looking at Maine right now and people are looking at cheap land. And if we have a lot of cheap land, people are going to prioritize Auburn.
Well, on that, I just did some math and I did some research real quickly. 4 acres of land will generate 1 megawatt of solar generated power. The state, through legislation, has capped solar generation at, is it 325 megawatts or 350?
375 megawatts.
There's 3, that's statewide.
I believe so, yes.
We're looking at, just to put it in context, is if every solar project in the state of Maine happened in Auburn, that would be a total of 1,400 acres. Our current ag zone is 20,000 acres. I think I don't think it's feasible to say that 100% of all solar would be in Auburn. But I just to put it that to answer your question, Councilor McLeod and Councilor Boss, kind of put that in perspective.
Thank you.
Well,
Councilor Carrier?
well, and I also want to point out that we're also not talking about the same type of use. During all the meetings that we had and the meetings that I've attended since, the use of solar in the agricultural zone is probably just about the least impactful as far as the land and prime soils. We're only talking about putting poles into the ground and having a little bit of infrastructure. Should that have to be removed, the prime soils remain. It's not like we're tearing out buildings or removing bad waste areas like we would if we say we were going to do MMA. You'd have all that area that you'd have to tear down, remove. With the solar, you're removing the panels, the poles that hold them, and the building. We're not destroying the soil. And as far as the forested lands, as Councilor McLeod said, any farmer in the area can go out and clear cut their lands and turn it into a pasture at any time that they want to, with no issues whatsoever. So from a use standpoint, and having been a farmer, solar would be about the least impactful that we'd have to worry about.
I'd like to piggyback a little bit off that. Thank you, Councilor Carrier, for that clarification. The other part I would I would caution, which I did see it in here as a recommendation, was to looking at the wildlife that currently inhabits our ag zone to make sure that it isn't, the solar projects wouldn't be impactful to any of our wildlife or natural habitats that we would be taking out, or to at least make sure we had accommodations for such.
And could you, I think Councilor Gary, you had a question, if I remember correctly? I'm trying to keep track here.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. From what I understand, talking to a couple farmers, some of these solar investors are trying to take options on people's properties just to get ahead of the curve in order to maybe get some of these, I forgot what you just called them, those watt things. If that happens and they take up too many options on land, that'll cut down what can be done in the ag zone.
The options will expire once cap's met.
But they still could take options so that if some come up, get more freed up or added to, then they'll be in prime position to just now.
Probably not a bad thing. Councilor Carrier?
Quick question for either Megan or Eric. And I didn't see it. Are we still talking about the solar projects being fenced in? Sort of like the one up in Pittsfield or the one up at Colby? Are we talking about encasing them in fenced areas?
I don't know if that standard, I don't believe that standard actually made it into the ordinance that they are required to be fenced. I think under technical and safety, that's one of the recommendations. And I believe that the solar firms that we've spoken to, that's a requirement that they have to fence them in, but I don't think we also put it in the ordinance.
Because that was the Councilor McLeod's issue about impeding the wildlife in the area. I know that having lived out at the airport, once they put the fence in out there, it did affect the wildlife, but if it's not currently in our regulation, then it might be looked at to maybe leave that open, because I don't think wildlife would be harmful, I don't believe, to a solar installation.
It's not in the zoning ordinance, but it is in the National Electric Code that we have to follow. So it comes from the life safety review, not from our zoning. But it's not I think the airport fence is quite a bit taller than 6 feet. A 6-foot fence for this is pretty typical. And we talked about that a little bit, and deer can move over a 6-foot fence, but I don't know about, a smaller coyote or something wouldn't be able to.
They go under it.
I will say, from a practical standpoint, with my solar arrays, they do put a protective mesh on the back simply because deer do love wire, and a lot of wildlife do. And that is pulsing at an extremely high rate of electricity, and that can cause some significant issues. So they do put a protective mesh on the backside of the paneling, encapsulating the wires. Again, I'm not sure though. I mean, in a residential, it's different with regards to fencing in the area in which they're in. But I would say that there is some harm or potential. Councillor Boss and Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I just had a quick question about the definition of a prime soil and how does that differ from the soil of statewide importance designation?
Yeah, we defined prime soil as soils of statewide significance. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up language here on my screen.
While she's pulling that up, we are proposing that as a requirement of one of these applications that they would have to do a soil survey, so we would have that information. And it will also help us map our soils by getting that information over time.
Right. Yeah. So the way that we have it phrased is that we're requiring that soil analysis, and we're requiring that the analysis demonstrate if the site proposed contains prime farmland as defined by the United States Department of Agriculture.
Great.
And then requiring that they use the least productive agriculture soils first.
Thank you. I'm in support of that.
Councillor McLeod?
I just have a quick question about a kind of a follow-up to what Councillor Boss said. If a lot of solar firms are going to move into the ag zone, that would slightly deter them from going to the industrial zone. Is there any benefit to looking at the tax rate or to change if a solar installation is put in ag property? Not to unentice that to happen, but just to kind of make it up, because now they have 100 acres of a commercially viable power generation plant rather than, natural farmland ag stuff.
That parcel and the development on that parcel would be valued at a much higher value than just pure ag land would be. So it doesn't shield them from the taxable value of the equipment that they're providing, even though the land purchase price may be lower in the beginning.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it caught up somewhere in the back end. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Again, we'll have plenty of time once planning board reviews this and sends us up to our first reading in May. Any other comments or wishes, questions for clarification in the future? Councillor Boss?
There was one comment, and I can't remember if it came from the Conservation Commission or the Planning Board, but someone suggested that the landowner should be asked regarding density of different arrays. Is that being planned, or what was staff response to that recommendation?
Yeah, so we're going back and forth on density and lot coverage and those questions that were brought up, and we're going to present the planning board with a couple of different options in terms of how they want to handle that. I know there's been discussion about considering the face of the panel, which could take up a lot more lot coverage than just the mounting blocks. So we're kind of going back and forth through that to figure out what option the planning board is going to want to take. But if we do consider the face of the panels, then the solar projects would take up a lot more space than they would with just considering the mounting blocks. So for example, if you just consider the mounting blocks with a 30% lot coverage, it could take up 10 acres. But if you consider the face of them, they could take up 50 acres and have the panels spread out all over the site. So we're kind of leaving that up to the board in May to see what they think is best.
Thank you.
Very good then. Thank you very much. Mr. Cousins and Ms. Norwood. I appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Take care.
Next, we have a proposed amendments to the Citizens Participation Plan and Annual Action Plan. Mr. Lenhart.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you. I'm here to discuss. A few weeks ago, when Congress passed the CARES Act, the CDBG program and HUD received some funds, and Auburn has received $334,985. Along with that CARES Act, there was some waivers that are being allowed to grant us some flexibilities so we can get the money out the door faster and better respond to these things. So I wanted to talk to you about what the Citizens Advisory Committee and city staff has put together here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the waivers. First thing in the citizen participation plan, we're making amendments to take advantage of those waivers. The biggest change to that, I would say, is the allowing the 5-day public comment period for the amendments and plans. And that's for amendments of the 2019 program year, which we're currently in, for program year 2020 in the consolidated plan. And then again, for any amendments with these funds that were provided in the CARES Act. So it provides a waiver so we can, be more nimble with and respond to things a little bit faster here. While we were bringing this plan in front of, for an amendment, there was some other kind of housekeeping things on it. Previously, the citizen participation plan had mentioned target areas that were defined. It had been defined by a study that had been done over 10 years ago. If we were to maintain those target areas, we would need to redo a study again and have that all surveyed, the areas. Or we can go by the census blocks that HUD provides. It's a lot simpler way to do it. So we're recommending going to using the census blocks for the target areas. It also allows an alternate notice process so that we can put it out through the internet, essentially, and web pages, posted in the library and things like that, as opposed to needing to do just the newspaper. It also updates the CAC nomination process. I know we are kind of out of line with all the other committees, so to just kind of make things simple for everybody, we would bring the nomination process in line with the rest of the board and committee appointments, and it would set the CAC members to 7. Right now, the plan calls for, I believe, 11. We're operating right now with 5, so it would set it at 7, which is a more manageable number for us. The other change would change the definition of a substantial amendment from 10% to 25% of the budget, which that would mean for if we wanted to change these plans, anything under that 25% could be signed off by the city manager instead of needing to go through the lengthy amendment process over again. So those are the recommended changes for the citizen participation plan that were recommended by the Citizens Advisory Committee. And then to get into the funds that were provided, we had kind of put out a survey to the city departments and how they're responding to the pandemic and what's going out, and surveyed other public service providers and came up with a budget for the response. 3 main focus areas. One is food security, the other economic development, and the third would be public services. We're proposing to make $134,985 available for food security. That would mainly be used to increase capacity for the meals provided. Right now, the Senior Community Center, along with the PAL Center, is providing meals to the elderly and other vulnerable residents of the city of Auburn. Right now, they're the main thing that limits the capacity is the refrigeration, their refrigeration capacity. And along with the senior center has experienced a couple of power outages. I think in the last snowstorm, and I believe food was wasted. So a large chunk of that money would be for generation, for a backup generator and refrigeration at the senior center kitchen, potentially the PAL Center, if they have the room for it. In that category too, any remaining funds could be used for something like farmer market vouchers that would go to eligible households. The economic development, we would come up with, we're drafting guidelines right now for a small business loan program to help businesses that were have been affected by the pandemic. We can be a little more flexible with our funds than the payroll protection program. So we can potentially cover some areas that weren't covered by that. And I think one of our main focuses is we're going to be looking at micro enterprises, which are small businesses, 1 to 5 employees, one of them being the owner of the business. So we're talking a lot of, self-employed businesses and things that may not have paid into unemployment. So they're struggling. And we're drafting up guidelines right now for those. The other one would be the public service would make available grants to some of our local public service providers that are experiencing extra costs due to the pandemic. So they could apply for some grants to help them out with that. Our goal here is to keep these categories a little bit broad so that as things come up, we can respond to that without needing to change small details in our plan. And that's the goal of keeping it general on that. And I'll open it up to any questions that people may have for that.
You started off with a 135,000. Is it? What are you going to do? Split this 3 ways, or was there a different for economic and for public? Was there a different price?
Oh, sorry, I didn't give the amounts for economic development. It was $100,000, and for public service grants, we're looking at $50,000 provided to them. We also then the remaining $50,000 would be to cover administration costs. For example, the economic development specialist in our department to cover his salary as he's managing the business loan program and things like that. So it's not coming out of taxpayers' general fund.
Yeah, Councilor Sonia.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. I have a few different questions. I just want to make sure that we are very thoughtful about how this money is being used and where it's going. It's a lot of money. It's coming to us right now. We're feeling pressure to use it. I understand. I want to make sure that it gets out there, but I would love a little more information on what the plan is. A couple things. One, a plan for public participation, which is part of what is important for this. And with a very short time frame, with that 5-day turnaround, there should be a really robust plan for making sure that we include public participation. The actual CAC has 5 members of a 7-member committee, and I'm concerned that a broad range of representation is not on there. And maybe it is, I just don't know about it. But I think it's really important, particularly for people who have experience with people who are suffering from homelessness and also low-income communities. I want to make sure that they are represented on the CAC because this is a good amount of money. The target areas, so we're expanding them to moderate and low income. What does that mean? It's been very specifically focused and very well defined over a number of years as to the communities. I'm just going to put the questions out there. If you want to respond, just let me know. Money for economic development. I know that we've had some different programs for economic development that haven't been as successful. For example, the STAR program, for a number of reasons. I just want to make sure that we're not doing the same thing with these funds in terms of economic development, that it really is well thought out and that we know that it's something that the community needs. And also to make sure that those applying for economic development funds are actually viable businesses. I think that there are some businesses who are able to keep hanging on with these funds without us doing really our due diligence to make sure that this will actually help them to move forward as opposed to just allow them to hang on. And how does this all align with the strategic plan? I think it's important, even though I know this is, we're in a crisis situation, this is really dramatic. There's a good amount of money and we want to make sure that it's supporting the strategic plan as well as supporting the people who originally it was focused on. Thank you.
All right, yeah, I can go down a few of those. As far as kind of amending the definition of the target area, the target area that we have currently is what HUD considers a low to moderate income area. Low to moderate income means 80% or less of the median income. Our target areas, our current target areas are also considered a blighted areas, and it potentially allows us to do a few more things with the target areas that we've had in the past, but our programs really weren't designed to take advantage of those, and in order to continue those blighted projects, we would need to redo that study and kind of come up with almost essentially the same boundary lines that HUD is giving us. So in order to kind of streamline the administrative process, HUD gives us these areas that are defined by the census and the income area. And so it makes it easier for us. And this has actually expanded the area that we can do activities in. So I think it's a good thing for that, for the city. As far as the economic, you did kind of mention we've had trouble in the past getting out the money for the STAR program. One of the things HUD has their guidelines with economic development is for businesses, it needs to be gap funding, which means they essentially have needed to try everything else or else we couldn't fund them. If we do micro enterprise businesses, that doesn't require that gap fund. So more businesses would be eligible. That's not something that we have right now. We have a small business program. That's the STAR program. It's not a micro enterprise program. So we're looking to focus this more on micro enterprises. The underwriting requirements are less for micro enterprises, and I think that's been a big hurdle for getting those underwriting requirements for businesses in the past. So I think that focusing on micro enterprises will allow this to happen a little bit more. And then as far as the the CAC goes, again, changes to this to the citizen participation plan should make it, I believe, easier. I think the process was a little bit confusing in the last time, and hopefully that we can get a full membership on there and meet the requirements.
Yeah, let me jump in there and dovetail off what Zach said. The CAC membership was amended last July with the intent broadly defined as making it easier to get people into that and have a broad representation from all areas of the service area. It was still very cumbersome and hard when you needed someone to represent, let's say, low income in one specific neighborhood, i.e., Union Street. It really kind of cut off a lot of people who would add a lot of value and represent that same demographic that just didn't happen to live on that street. So this way, I believe this, like Zach said earlier, it gets it in line with the majority of our other council committees. The mayor appoints a city councilor as a representative. The application process happens with our applications pool, and then those names come up for final debate and either approval or non-approval at the council level. So it does get things a little bit more streamlined and still accomplishes the goal, probably actually better this way, because we can open up some more qualified, capable representatives of those target communities.
I'm just concerned that there hasn't been a really active recruitment of people representing.
You should not assume that, because I've been personally working with staff and community members to actively recruit. I've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to do so. So please, let's not assume that, that's not happening, even though you might not see it. It's happening, and it's happening a lot, and hence why this move is needed.
Well, I look forward to seeing the outcomes of that. Thank you.
Zach, how long do you think it'll take for this program to be used up that you're looking at right here?
Which one of the programs? Are you speaking of the food security or the economic development?
The three of them together. How long is this going to take us? A year to use up this $300 and something thousand, or are we going to do it in 3 months, 6 months?
The HUD gives us longer than a year to get all of these funds. I expect the majority of these funds to be spent within a few months. We're talking with the senior center and PAL, the food security program. We're currently getting quotes and seeking out prices. So once funds are ready to purchase, those will happen quickly. Same thing with economic development. We're going to be looking to put guidelines out there shortly after it's approved and open up applications for that. Same thing with the public service grants. That said, especially thinking on the economic development part, similar to the emergency grant that the council put out, I could foresee the majority of that money going quickly and then having some funds left over. I'm not sure though, but potentially we can, if the funds aren't moving out of that program, we can amend the process to get them something that where the money is moving. We don't want to sit on these funds for a long time.
Well, the reason I asked is because you're saying that you may need $50,000 for, I guess, putting this in the right places and doing it the right way. That sounds like a lot of money. If this is only going to take us 3 months to deliver all this, and it looks like to me, with the way everything is going within this city, that it shouldn't take us much more than a couple months to do a couple of these right off quick. And then, I don't know, maybe the other one will take us 3 months or 4, but $50,000 is a lot of money to pay someone that you've already got a plan, and the plan is pretty well written how we're going to use this money. So I can't believe we got to spend $50,000 to a person that's going to tell us how to use and what to do with it.
So it wouldn't be just one person. It would be time spent that I've spent on this, time spent for the economic specialist when he works on it, the department directors if he's working on these programs, the potentially the city electrician, if he's doing administration stuff, working on the, to get the generator and price quotes on that. There may be those funds remaining. I don't anticipate using all $50,000 of that again, and then potentially we could make an amendment to fund it with something else.
Are you telling me that people are gonna work extra hours of their day to do these jobs, or are they gonna work in the same 7.5 hours that they work to come up with the numbers that we may need?
Yeah, so for example, in my position, I have to keep track of whether I'm working on CDBG or home, and which HUD program that gets billed to. And now I'm going to have one more program, this CDBG-CV, that all time I spend on this program, I'm going to bill to these funds. So depending on which program we're working on, we have to track our time, and then it gets billed towards that. So like HUD doesn't want me billing time I spend on this program to the normal CDBG program. They're going to expect it going to these. And then the same thing with the economic development specialist. So potentially what actually happens is the money we have for administration in the program year 2019, we'll likely spend a little less in that money, because time will be spent on these pandemic response funds. And if the economic specialist is working on loans, what he would be billing, I think, to the TIF funds, or whatever his position is funded by, would be reduced from that.
Zach, just to clarify Council Walker's question, no, everyone that's working regular hours will continue to get their regular hours. It'll just be how it's billed. But then there's also some options here on, our staff right now are already pretty busy, and I think that might be what you're alluding to, Council Walker, is that those funds can also be spent to bring someone in to assist in that and pay for those duties that they're doing. So we do have some options, and we're going to continue kind of working out that plan.
Yeah, that's a good comment by Phil and by Zach and Council Walker. I appreciate your questioning on that. I've been involved with HUD CDBG program for well over 20 years, and they are very strict in terms of how they want the accountability on who's being paid for the work that they're doing. So, as Zach said, if we do not expend all of 50,000, we can amend the agreement, and then we can move forward and expend the funds elsewhere.
Councilor, we're going to start Councilor McLeod.
Except I was muted. There we go. I had one question, a couple of questions actually. Is any of the food security items part of the phase 3 plan for the senior center? Or any of those items that you listed, refrigeration, power generation, stuff like that, as part of our phase 3 that we're looking at for our CIP items? Do you know?
In other words, offsetting.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I'm personally unaware of the CIP and of the phase 3 and all of those details. Okay. I do know that one of our thinkings of that is that once we spend these funds, these will be items that we can have to respond to anything in the future as well.
Okay. The other comment I had is going from 10% to 25%. Excuse me, of considering that a substantial amendment. That's a lot of money difference in there, because that would be just on this money. That would be a difference of either 13,000 or 33,000. Being able to quickly accommodate that. So I might settle with somewhere in the middle of that. I understand that needing the flexibility is important, but that's a big chunk of change to be able to swing wildly in a different direction very quickly.
So where that originated from, when I was doing this, I was looking at a lot of other communities, citizen participation plans. Most of them are above 10%. Most are around 20%. I did bring it to the CAC, who actually the CAC recommended a 30% substantial amendment. And then I spoke to the HUD rep who recommended 25%. So that was where I settled on the 25. It was just a recommendation, thinking I'm bringing it in line with a lot of other communities to bump it up, allow us to be more responsive. Again, I leave it up to you guys to decide. I can work with what it is. I think that increasing that allows us to be more responsive, though.
And if I could, I want to go to Councilor Boss right now, but right before that, I just want to remember that this is very broad and broad overview, and that a more detailed plan with line items will be presented in the very near future. Okay, so I know we have a lot of questions and thoughts and priorities, but there will be more concrete, which I think will hopefully kind of solve, or not solve, but address everybody's concerns and at least give us something else to talk about. So, Councilor Boss.
Thank you. I had the same two questions actually as Councilor McLeod, but for 25% of the total budget, right, $334,000, that's $83,000 of wiggle room. To me, that is too much. So I think finding a medium between previously the 10% and something lower than 25%, I'd feel more comfortable with.
Was it 25% of the overall budget, or 25% of the grouping within the budget, i.e. food insecurity?
What I read total contract, total funding, but go ahead.
It's total funding.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money.
It is. Councilor Zanya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions, and it sort of piggybacks on what Councilor McLeod and Boss said. What kind of reporting and follow-up are we going to hear? It should be pretty active, because this is a lot of money and it's happening very quickly. And the other thing is the CAC must have a really aggressive meeting schedule, because they need to be having input on this on a regular basis. Is that true? I want to make sure that there's real representation from the CAC on this.
We did pause when this whole thing started, but we have been meeting weekly in the past, I would say the past 3 weeks.
And is that the plan moving forward? Because again, this is going to happen quickly.
Yeah, so the CAC met on and met their recommendation on this. This is, recommending to pass this. They will be meeting for the consolidated plan and the annual action plan moving forward. And then once that budget is passed, we'll go back to a normal meeting schedule of once a month.
And just as an aside, I hope that we get a really good presentation about the plan for the consolidated plan. So thank you.
Councilor McLeod, last question, then we're going to keep on moving through this.
All right, just a quick question. It says the CAC meets in person or virtually. Is that virtually just until all of this is over, or is virtually okay for that type of committee moving forward?
Personally, I'd like to keep it virtually, kind of moving forward always. I would intend to meet live all the time, but it would just allow that option.
Whereas they're an advisory, they don't have to, they're not bound by the same rules, or that might be a city manager question too. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It was just curiosity.
I think everybody's going to want to start meeting more and more via Zoom, frankly.
Before COVID, we were meeting in person. We've been meeting remotely since COVID, and I'm not sure when that's going to change.
I just know we took that out of the Great Falls TV language in ours just because it wasn't allowed anymore, now that it is.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Zach. We appreciate your update, and we'll have more on this in the next meeting on May 4th. We'll be moving along now to the city manager, final proposed budget. Someone drum roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is my final proposed budget based on the feedback and the comments from each of you at the last budget workshop that we had. Go to the next slide, Phil. So we have made some adjustments. We have still a plan on delaying the hiring of the deputy finance director until January. That'll bring about a savings of $35,000. And this is something that I've discussed with Phil and Jill a number of times. School department professional fundraiser has been taken out based on the feedback. That's still something that you could do going forward in the next budget if you chose to do that, or the school department could do that. We did hear what you had to say regarding a grant writer, and we have put in $18,000 to be able to contract with one or more people to assist us with grant writing. And that brings a total of 77,000 savings versus what was there before, which provides for a zero tax levy increase for the city operating budget. In terms of the CIP, there was a good discussion on the CIP. Again, we listened to what you had to say regarding the CIP. There were reductions here. You have a list of them. The rail study has been eliminated. We've reduced the amount of funding on the security access control and have been talking with Derek Belanger about how to do that. We had a phased in approach when the proposed CIP was put together. This will take a little longer by doing it this way, but I think we're still going to accomplish some important things that need to be done. Then the water treatment has been eliminated for the arena, the portable stage as well. The Ingersoll mezzanine has been eliminated. And the public safety study, as you may recall, there was a placeholder of $200,000. Derek Belanger has been working with Woodard and Curran, has an estimate of $100,000. So we reduced that portion down to $100,000. As you may recall, there was a discussion about utilizing the other $100,000, which I will talk about in a moment. So there are reductions of $376,000 with this slide. And then in terms of adjustments, we've added in the mezzanine furniture at the arena. You may remember the comment about Councilor Walker in the chair that broke when we had a meeting at the arena. We do need to do something about the furniture. Restored the funding on major drainage back to what the request was by the Public Works Director, which I think is the appropriate thing to do. And then on recreation program facility study, there was a good discussion regarding the tot lot, as well as what we're doing with PAL, and also the idea of doing a study on a larger Ingersoll turf facility. That turf facility, as you know, is highly successful and been very effective. So I think it makes sense to look at doing that. On the downtown vision, we renamed the Great Falls Plaza vision to downtown vision based on the discussion that you all had. There's still 100,000 there, plus the existing 100,000 that's in the FY20 budget. So there would be 200,000 to help with the downtown vision, which is something that I know you all agree is important. And then on the assessing electronic vehicle, electric vehicle, we have moved that from bonds to reallocated funds. And then the Festival Plaza fountain, we've moved that from bonds to reallocated. So the net reduction is 206,000. And what that does is that reduces the bonded amount from a recommendation of 9.5 million to 9.3. This page shows where we are with the tax rate with a zero tax levy increase. The city would stay the same. The school would as well. The school is still working through their budget process. School committee has a budget meeting Wednesday evening of this week, as you know. I know that the target is zero on the school department budget. And then with intergovernmental, we believe we can get to zero on the intergovernmental services budget request. So the mill rate would stay where it is now. With the Lewis and Auburn Transit Committee, we've discussed the infusion of money from the CARES Act that has come to the LATC. There has been some discussion by the LATC board members. Councilor McLeod is a member. We had a discussion with some Lewiston representatives recently to talk about that. What I'm recommending is we use CARES funding to help with this situation. There's $195,000 unused in this current budget as a result of the CARES funding. I recommend showing $150,000 of this as revenue in the general fund for use to offset the county tax increase, which is about $150,000 to be repaid in the following year. And then I recommend that we have a flat budget of $331,138 for the LATC, which is what we have in our existing budget for FY20. And the unused amount would be carried forward. So that would give us zero increase on intergovernmental services. So as I mentioned, city budget would be zero. Hopefully the target for the school department will be met at zero. And then if you're agreeable with the approach on the LATC, the intergovernmental services budget would be zero. The CIP bonding would drop from 9.5 million to 9.3 million with what I'm proposing. So there would be zero property tax increase. And I think that's it.
Okay, very good. Mr. Manager, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
We have about 15 minutes before I want to take a break before the regular meeting for us to discuss this. I will say, though, right off the top, just to remind everybody how we're looking for time with regards to the entire budget season. What we did Thursday, I believe, really truncated this and escalated our conversation significantly. Coupled with the work, because of that the city manager and staff did, addressing some of our concerns and thoughts and suggestions, really, I think, bring us in line. I'm gonna applaud staff for listening, revising, and presenting something that's zero. There's a couple notes that I'd like to, before we have some questions, I'd like to ask the manager to just kind of elaborate a little bit on too. On the second slide, we talked about you're going to take the emergency reserve that's currently in the budget and appropriate it to the emergency reserve for next year, thereby almost doubling the emergency reserve fund, correct?
Correct. And I think that makes sense. And Mayor, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't mean to overlook that. We've gone through some different discussions regarding the emergency reserve funds, and with what the mayor is suggesting, which is to take the money that's unspent in the emergency reserve fund and basically roll it over into the FY20 budget for the emergency reserve fund, so that total amount would be 800,000 or so. That makes sense to me, to Phil Kroll, to Jill Eastman, because of the fact that we need to have a buffer for FY21 due to the fact that we're not sure what's going to happen with the economy. I am hopeful that, because this is not a recession that's been caused by an economic downturn, that we're going to have a quicker recovery. At the same time, we don't know what the legislature is going to do regarding municipal revenue sharing. We have, I think, been careful about what we projected on the municipal revenue sharing, but we don't know if because of the impact on state revenues, if the legislature might change what they've done on municipal revenue sharing. So by doing what the mayor has suggested, that builds a buffer for FY21 in the event that the revenues do not turn out the way that we're projecting or hoping that they will. It makes sense. The fund balance will not be impacted by that directly, and hopefully FY21 turns out better than anyone could imagine, and you'll be in a much stronger position as a result of making this change.
Thank you for that. Hopefully we never have to touch it.
That's correct.
Hopefully we don't.
Yeah.
So again, just kind of in layman's terms, maybe for people that are at home listening, if the state shorts us on rev share, we have a budget that we can utilize to offset those losses without tapping into our fund balance, ideally. I'll talk a little bit more about federal stimulus to local municipalities during communications portion to try to shed a little bit more light on that for you as a council. Do you have any questions of the manager right now on the proposed budget? We still have some work to do, of course, and final reviews. Councilor McLeod?
Does that include our current updated assessment as a city, that 0%?
No, it doesn't. And hopefully the way things have been tracking, the assessment will be positive news. From talking to the assessor, we've been tracking in a good direction. I don't think that what's going on now is going to impact that. There's been a lot happening in spite of what's happening regarding the pandemic. So I think that when the assessment is done, it will help us in terms of what we're doing.
And the second question I have is, how much bonded CIP money is worth 1 cent to the tax rate? Is there a formula for that?
Yeah, there is. I would defer to Jill on the intricacies of that. But let me just say this: keep in mind with the bonded money, the 9.5 million that I had proposed is not equivalent to 9.5 million in the budget. We have a debt service, like when you buy your home, for example. There's a debt service that is required for the 9.5 million. When we put the 9.5 million CIP together, when I proposed that, I did that keeping in mind that we didn't want to have a higher impact on the taxpayers. So we were trying to stay within budget. We did with that 9.5 million. By going from 9.5 to 9.3, that'll have no immediate impact on FY21, but it will help with FY22, depending on what you do going forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay.
You said, Mr. Manager, you said that this year we're not on a freeze, but we're on a slow spending.
Yes.
To get to the safe number, I guess. Do you have any idea where that's going to fall in the next, I guess, 6 weeks?
I don't right now, Councilor Walker, but we can give you continued updates. Jill will be speaking later, and she's been monitoring the expenses and monitoring the revenues. We will keep you updated as we go forward. I think we're headed in a good direction right now.
Thank you for that. The last question is, when I was listening to the school board in their meetings, they were talking about the buses going back into the CIP. Will that change anything with us if that happens?
Well, that's a good question. We'll see what the school committee does Wednesday night. I know that the superintendent has informed the assistant city manager and myself, and I think you're all aware of this, but if you're not, I certainly want you to be. They have received CARES money as well. 780,000, I think, is the amount. Maybe Councilor Carrier, you can verify that. That's going to help them with their.
That's the estimate that we were given.
Yeah, that will help with their goal of trying to get to zero. So I don't know how what they do with the buses will impact that, but I'm confident knowing that they have that funding from the CARES Act that they will be able to get to zero. Does that sound right, Councilor Carrier?
Yeah, so we got the proposed budget from superintendent on Friday, and I'm sure that there will be some spirited discussion on Wednesday.
Sounds good.
I think it's worked out. Is there any other questions?
When should we expect? Oh, sorry. When should we expect to get an updated copy of our budget and the CIP items? Even digitally would be fine.
Good question. I don't feel prepared to answer that question tonight, but we'll get it to you as soon as we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I know our next meeting is May 4th. I will talk with the staff and we'll get it to you as soon as we can.
Very good. Thank you very much. At this time, there's no other comments on the budget, no other questions. I want to ask the council now just to talk about timing a little bit. We know from last meeting that we, by law, cannot approve the school budget until 30 days out from the election, which is looking like around July 15th now. But we can look at our CIP and our operation budgets a little bit earlier if we want. Is there a consensus that we want to have a good workshop on this on May 11th, May 18th, and potentially move up our readings on the appropriation resolve to May 18th versus June 1st in order to get that kind of out of the way without, doing it any disservice, and moving forward to recovery planning as well. Because in my mind here is if we're doing a progression, we have a smart budget. We'll talk about some line items, of course. We execute that. We get that on the books. We open up bandwidth here to help supporting staff and our community recover and move forward. Councilor Lasagna?
I agree that trying to stick with our schedule is a good way to go about it because we've been doing a lot of work up front on this, including the Thursday meetings, which have been extremely helpful, and I hope we continue them next year so that we have that in place that does allow us to then begin to look forward in terms of all the other issues that we have to deal with. I think that's a good idea.
So council pretty much in agreement with kind of getting our CIP plan adopted and having our first reading on May 18th.
Yes.
Yep. I'm taking some nods. Okay, very good. I'm going to confer with staff a little bit more offline about that. Make sure logistically that we're prepared. And of course, at any time between now and then, if the majority of council thinks we need a little bit more time after looking at the revisions, we can have it. Okay. Okay, perfect then. If there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to put us into recess here for the next 22 minutes. If everybody's good with that.
Yes.
Okay, 22 minutes. Grab a cup of tea, Councilor Boss, and I'll do the same. We'll see you all later at 7 o'clock.
Very good.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting for April 27th, 2020. I believe we're all on now. I'd like to open up with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
of the
the
United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands one
one
nation
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice for all.
Oh,
There we go. That's great. Very good. I'm glad we could actually make that work. Next on our on the agenda, we have consent items. First, Order 47-04272020, appointing election clerks to serve a 2-year term from May 1, 2020 through April 30th, 2022, pursuant to Title 21A 503. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I
Second.
have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor Carrier and a second from Counselor Walker.
Point
Is
of
there any
order.
debate? No, none debate. I'll now.
Hold on. I think that's two.
Yep. We should be doing both consent items at the same time in one motion.
Very good. Then let me also state that we have the second consent item, Order 4804272020. I have 2 consent items. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor Carrier and a second from Counselor Walker. Is there any discussion amongst the council?
point of information, can you please say what the second one is, since you already read what the first one was, dealing with election clerks?
Absolutely. Confirming Chief Moens' appointment of Tyler Traynor as a constable with Firearm for the Auburn Police Department. If there's no other comment, I will now ask the clerk for a roll call vote.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
The consent items passed by a vote of 7-0. Moving on, we have the minutes from the April 6, 2020 regular council meeting. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes? I'll now take a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion to accept.
Second.
A motion from Counselor Walker and a second from Counselor Boss. Any further conversation? None being. I'll ask the clerk to again do a roll call vote on the acceptance of the meeting's minutes for April 6th.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
Minutes are approved by a vote of 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have minutes to approve for the April 16th, 2020 special council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes at this time? None being, I'll ask for a motion.
Motion to accept.
Second.
A motion, Counselor Walker, and a second by Counselor Carrier. Anything further to add to those minutes? None being, I'll ask the clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Yes
Counselor,
for me.
okay. Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
Minutes are approved by a vote of 7-0. Next, communications, presentations, and recognitions. I ask the city manager for a COVID-19 update, please. Mr. Manager, you are on mute.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, councilors, our Deputy Fire Chief Safety Director, Matt Fifield, will provide an update, as well as the Assistant City Manager, Phil Kroll, who's our Emergency Management Director. Matt?
So, Mayor, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Give you a brief update on the status of the COVID-19 outbreak for the state of Maine. Current numbers in the state of Maine as of today, 1,023 confirmed cases in the state. That is up from eight from yesterday. Recovered, we're at 549, which is up by 17 as of yesterday. And today reporting 51 total deaths with one additional death today. Active cases, 423, continues to be a very good trend there to stay well ahead of that with the active cases. Androscoggin County, more locally for us, confirmed cases 42. Of those 42, only 17 are active. And we did report one additional death over the weekend to bring our total in Androscoggin County to 2. Currently hospitalized in the state of Maine, 39. Almost up to 17,000 negative tests conducted by the state CDC. More locally, some of the efforts going on throughout the state more locally is the focus on nursing homes still, as I've repeated in a couple of my weekly addresses to you. More locally here, the EMA locally got a hold of us today, and they are working with a couple of our local nursing homes to work on getting them additional PPE and get them fit tested for the appropriate mass they need, so they're better prepared in case they do have an outbreak in one of their nursing homes. As I reported at the end of last week, John F. Murphy Home had made the news, unfortunately, with 3 positive cases of COVID-19. I did confirm with them today they had 14 staff members tested at the end of last week. They have an additional 3 staff or patients that have tested positive. All of those that have tested positive have either been moved out of Auburn or they are currently at home in a self-quarantine. Again, the trending data that I use often to predict where we're headed with this technically puts us out of the peak at this time. So the peak range, we have made it past that, and we're going to see a continuing trend downward in the cases and deaths. And I guess I'd finish it with, at all levels, we're seeing a lot of talk about coming out of this and what it looks like for us and the steps towards some normalcy. And I think it's all a great sign for all of us. We're heading in the right direction. So that is my update for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, I'm sorry, Mr. Assistant Manager, Mr. Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As Matt said, we're seeing positive trends. We are moving forward. We're encouraged by these numbers that we're seeing, encouraged by what we're hearing coming out of Augusta as well. I think we'll hear more from the governor tomorrow as far as where things are at. Her current stay-at-home order ends on the 30th. So we'll be looking forward to hearing what she has to say. As far as transitioning for City Hall and city staff, we are putting plans in place. As I reported last week, we will be transitioning certain staff members back into Auburn Hall. As you know, we've had a very skeleton crew here at Auburn Hall and at our other remote facilities as well. But we will be transitioning people back on May 4th. We are also transitioning people back to normal schedules on May 4th. We'll be making some minor adjustments, certainly paying attention to staff who may have concerns regarding returning to work. If they're eligible to telework, we're going to continue doing that for them as we can. But we will be making those essential changes starting next Monday. We are putting systems in place at Auburn Hall and at our outlying facilities to ensure that we have a good screening process for staff before they come in. That week, during that week, we'll be working on ensuring that we have systems in place for when we do have the green light to open up for public, what that will look like and how we'll allow public into our facilities. Staff is also working on making other adjustments as far as programming and ensuring that we're ready and geared up to hit the ground running and be able to provide the appropriate programs for our citizens as soon as we're able. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Is there anything else from staff, Mr. Manager, on COVID-19 at this time?
No, not at this time. On Monday, May 4th, we'll do another update. And at that time, Mark Goslin will also speak about how we're doing with the recovery team.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to council. We're going to start from my right. So that would be Councilor Gary. Do you have any communications?
Not at present, thank you.
Councilor Lasagna?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that are really being thoughtful about our appointments to committees, because I don't want to slow us down when there's a lot going on, and we need to really be ready to hit the road running when we are able to. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Nope, nothing yet.
Councillor Milks.
Nothing yet.
Councillor Carrier.
Nothing yet.
Councillor Walker.
Can't hear you.
Now you can.
Yes.
Hopefully, by the 4th, things will be in our favor. We'll be able to open up a lot more than just maybe 1 or 2 restaurants, because boy, oh boy, sitting around twiddling your thumb trying to come up with things to do is not easy. We've been at it a long time. It's time to get out of it, go back to work.
You know, if you got a rototiller, you can come to my house.
No, too physical.
Councillor Boss.
Nothing for this time for in terms of communications, but just to say that from an epidemiology perspective and a history perspective, the second wave is always worse than the first when you lift restrictions. So let's not forget what history has taught us and what the field of epidemiology provides to us in this conversation.
Very good.
Mayor, may I ask a question of Councilor Walker dealing with one of his positions?
Yes.
Councilor Walker, are you going to put out there whether or not First Auburn's going to meet? Because last we knew, you said we would probably be meeting the first Wednesday in May.
I thought I said June, but you might be right. But we're not. We're definitely not going to meet the first Wednesday of May. But I'm pretty sure when I talked with our recreation person there, it was June. I think we were planning on June, but we won't start in May. That's for sure. Not until Phil and everybody else has everything in place for us, because we'll be bringing seniors in there, and we're not ready for that yet.
Thank you.
Very good. I've got a few items of communication to update the council on. First, let me just address a couple of things. I appreciate staff's comments earlier. I will back that up with saying that they are acting extremely humbly right now and reporting out what they're doing, but especially in the thought process that's going behind some of their actions, either now or in the future. I had an update call with them just recently, and I was very impressed as we're talking about second wave, Councillor Boss, proper protocols, precautions at every level of city government and service, that they're actually taking those into account. They're forward thinking, they're looking at how to solve problems. So that doesn't come out when they're giving their very black and white report, but I want everybody here to know that there's a lot of thought, and I've been thankfully privy to some of that, and I've been very impressed with that process. So thank you, staff, for doing that. Everything's quite well thought out. And yes, they have no problem telling me that I have a cockamamie idea and that I need to stop. So, and I do appreciate that. I know you all do. So, on more legitimate ideas and recognitions, I just want to say that there is a slow movement already towards a new normal. For example, Hobby Lobby was granted as an essential business status by DECD in Augusta. Their first day of being open was today. So we're starting even in preparation of the governor's future directives. We're starting to see a new normal happening. So that was encouraging. More restaurants are opening out. I spent a lot of time touring the city over the weekend. Christie's Cafe in Minot Avenue is out. They're also forward thinking on potential anticipation of governor's orders. What would it look like if they could only have 30% of seats? How would they control volume? What would they do? So I'm seeing a lot of businesses starting to think forward and have proper planning now, even though it's still up in the air and nobody knows when or how, but at least they're getting ahead of that. And that's obviously the sign of a healthy and strong, vibrant business. Tomorrow's press conference with the governor, I believe, is at 2 p.m. So we'll all be waiting for that. I'm communicating with the governor tomorrow morning and reinforcing some earlier communications letting her know how Auburn is ready and willing and able to move forward with opening up and supporting her past orders, and thinking a little bit more dynamically, if you would, on what can we do in order to make sure that essential activities that might not be specifically covered or not covered or covered under past executive orders are modified if need be. For example, I'm going to give credit to Councilor Gary today during a phone call. We talked about community gardens and how they're currently some gray area on whether or not they're essential or non-essential. And I think the argument can be very well made that community gardens, because they produce a food, a source of food and help solve food insecurity with proper protocols, they can be reopened. It's timely. Those beds need to be worked over in preparation for a finite growing season. We brought that to staff today. They're looking at it, and they'll hopefully report very soon on what those protocols could be and if it's an approved or acceptable activity. So just want to throw that out there because that is an important aspect. And there's many others too. Again, just like a lot of things weren't specifically, nor could they be specifically defined, it's up to us to bring and communicate with the governor and certain department heads in Augusta what we need as our community moves forward. We also will reiterate the communication with the governor regarding the $1.25 billion in initial stimulus earmarked for municipalities and the first stimulus that the Congress passed. I asked or made myself available, as well as other mayors throughout the state, to be part of that process. I'm going to reinforce that because we do need to know where that money is going to be distributed and how, but frankly, we also need to have a part in that formulation of the plan to make sure that the monies are going to where it's needed at the municipal level. So we'll be pushing hard for that and advocating, also advocating for additional stimulus and giving specific guidance to our congressional delegation on where we would use that stimulus. Recreation, food security, infrastructure. Staff has been very, very detailed on providing that comprehensive list out to me. I will send you a copy of that finalized letter as soon as I send it out to the 3 members of our congressional delegation. I do, and I'm glad earlier, I just want to talk about recovery and really what I like to say is a resurgence in Auburn. We all need to continue to think about that. I'm pleased with the budget that the city manager and assistant city manager and staff put together. I think we are now able, to devote some mental energy to our strategic plan, our downtown commercial viability focus, and really make sure that we're executing quickly and thoughtfully. Okay, I have no doubt that will happen based upon my preliminary conversations, and I look forward to, in the next coming days, more information in greater detail on how that plan is going to come forward. So, and individually, I'll be talking, as I have already, with you counselors on how you feel about that plan and soliciting some feedback as well. That is the last of my communications. I don't believe I missed anything, but at this point, I normally don't do it. Is there any questions from the council out to me?
No, Mr. Mayor, I just would like to reiterate to you and to encourage and thank you for reaching out to the governor. I think that we as citizens are capable of responsibly and safely moving towards transitioning into the next phase of this situation. So I thank you for writing to the governor and expressing that I think we as a city are capable of responsibly handling our lives going forward, and looking forward to this next move and in-person meeting next Monday.
Very good. Anything else? No? Very good. Then we're going to keep moving right along.
I'm sorry. Are we having an in-person meeting next Monday?
Oh, I'm sorry. We talked about it last week, and yes, the desire right now is to have an in-person meeting, socially distanced, next Monday, May 4th. Making accommodations for public participation remotely, as well as any counselor that feels that they cannot make it in there in person. So we're working on that. I talked to Peter and Phil today. Some IT things that we need to hammer out in order to make that workable, but we'll be corresponding with you over the next couple of days with more info. But yes, the desire is to have an in-person meeting on Monday.
Did we ask council members individually about that? I don't recall.
I have asked. I've asked council members about that. Again, and we talked about it last week. We're not going to put it up for a vote per se. It is a desire of the majority that I've talked with to do this. But of course, if anyone doesn't feel comfortable, absolutely acceptable. Okay, and we'll make proper accommodations. If we can't make proper accommodations, then we'll continue the way we're doing it right now. I want to make sure that no one's voice is diminished by any means, but I also think it's very important that we start getting into that environment where we're leading by example, not just meeting in person under normal conditions, but in a modified condition, showing that we can do this and still be safe. So I think that modeling, if you would, is going to be important going forward.
Perhaps we can wait to hear from the governor tomorrow. That can help us determine what our next move is.
No, well, I mean, the governor is pretty clear. And, keeping it under 10 people, appropriate social distancing with the option of remote. But home rule is home rule, and we will exercise that. So unless the governor, clamps down and makes her current executive orders more restrictive, this is the plan that we're going to be moving towards. Okay. Is there any other questions? No? Very good then. Then we'll move on. We'll move on to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business or any item that appears any item that does not appear on the agenda. Excuse me. I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, is Kelsey or Sue hosting or facilitating that? Phil?
Yes, but there are no members of the public currently attending this Zoom.
No members.
Correct.
Okay. Ask the clerk, was there any email correspondence sent in from the public?
Did not receive anything.
Okay, very good. I'll now close this first open session of the night. We do not have any unfinished business. On new business, we have resolved 07-0427-2020, supporting the Androscoggin River water quality classification upgrade from Class C to Class B. I'll ask for a motion at this time.
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Walker and a second from Councilor Carrier. Open this up to the council for any conversation or debate. I have to, okay, there we go. Is there any, I'm sorry, I got a full screen now. Is there any questions, any debate? We did workshop this before. Good. Very good then. No. Okay. I'll ask the clerk for a roll call.
Councilor Walker.
Yes.
Councilor Boss. Councilor Boss.
Yes.
Councilor Gary.
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna.
Yes.
Councilor McLeod.
Yes.
Councilor Milks.
Yes.
Councilor Carrier.
Yes.
Very good. The resolve does pass by a vote of 7-0.
And as a reminder, that letter needs to be sent within like the next 2 business days, right? There's a really tight turnaround for that?
Yeah, soon.
We'll make sure we execute, and then when it's executed, we can report out to the council.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda, reports. Mayor's report. I will just, one thing about committees. We have started allowing committees to start meeting. We're going to continue to do so and opening that up as pertinent topics come up as requested, and really as frankly as safely as possible when it becomes possible. So right now I have nothing else to report on that topic or anything else. So I will turn it over to the councilors' reports. I'll start on the opposite side. So that would be Councilor Boss.
Sure, thank you. We had our Auburn Public Library meeting on April 21st, our first by Zoom, and it went very well. And the next will be happening same time next month, probably likely as well on Zoom, though it's not been determined. And then my second update quickly is just to say that the Court Street study has been extended. The next meeting of the steering committee is going to be on May 1st at 10 a.m. also by Zoom. And that's all I've got.
Good, thank you. How's the library doing? I know we just got a report from Mamie not that long ago, but
I think they're doing as well as they can be given the circumstances, but the vast majority of their staff are furloughed, so it's certainly not a great position for them to be in.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I just want to make sure the city clerk sends us all updates of when our next meetings are and everything, because with everything that's been going crazy here, I'm not sure if I even know where I'm supposed to be. Other than that, the new park that we've got being built down here in New Auburn is still moving right along. We've got some nice asphalt put down, some curbing put in, and more curbing going in tomorrow if it doesn't rain hard. And they're really setting the park up. So I think it's going to be ready right about in the middle of June, so that we should have a great get together, hopefully by that time, down here to celebrate something great in the New Auburn area.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. That'd be Councilor Carrier.
Had correspondence today from the airport. We have not met, but we did get correspondence today from the airport manager in regards to the allotment from CARE. There was some discussion on the usage of that. And, he put out some different possible uses for us, and haven't heard back completely yet in regards to it, but maintaining the operation of the airport with the reduced revenues that we're suffering at this point due to runway issues and just the downturn in the economy. To Councilor Lasagna, you had mentioned something earlier about the building committee. What I show on the site is it's going to be May 5th at 6:30 through Zoom is what I have from the school committee part of it. The other issue was we have a budgetary meeting coming up on Wednesday. We did receive information from the superintendent into her proposed budget. We will be meeting Wednesday night with that. I'm sure that there will be quite a bit of debate in regards to the budget and the direction that we had asked her to consider and what it's going to be going forward.
Okay. Do you have any, or are you at liberty at this point to discuss about ballparks revenue with regards to the airport and CARES Act?
The airport, I believe, said that they received in the vicinity about $69,000. And there was some discussion with the board, but I don't know the end result of it. I sent him back my idea of what we should be doing with the money, and I'm sure that within the next couple of weeks we'll be having our meeting or continuing on with that discussion.
Very good. Well, I will say, in hindsight's 2020, it looks like this was a great year to have runway reconstruction and closure.
Yeah.
So there's a positive there. Okay, very good. Then thank you, Councilor. We're going to move on to Councilor Milks.
Yes, we had some activity on the sewer and water boards this week. Last week, I should say. Steve Ness was elected president of the sewer board. Tanya and Sid reappointed as clerk and superintendent. On the water department side, Dan Bilodeau was put representative to the Lewis and Auburn Water Commission. Andy Titus treasurer, and I'm going to be the president of the water district for the trustees for the next period of time, for the next year. Also, Sid and Tanya are staying on in their roles.
Craig, congratulations, El Presidente.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
That's good. I don't think in recent memory there's been a council representative as a president or even an officer on Auburn Water District. So congratulations for taking on the increased responsibility.
Well, thank you. It's humbling, and I'm going to try and do the best job that I can.
Very good.
We have had some representatives in positions, Mr. Mayor.
Well, your memory is much larger than mine.
Well, I'm a little older.
Just a little, thankfully. Moving on, Councilor McLeod.
Thank you. LATC met last week to discuss especially the CARES funds and a little bit to get our safety, our safety stuff set up to make sure that was done in a timely fashion. And the city manager, Creighton, has already talked about how that CARES Act money is going to help assist in our municipal sharing of our levy. So beyond that, Councilor Carey already said the next Auburn Building Committee is May 5th. That will be online as well.
Very good. Councilor Lasagna?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This probably should have been in reports, but I just want to mention how well our small farms are doing. And just to talk about farm drops that are going on and make sure that you're looking in the paper for them being what they're doing in terms of really ramping up their business plan and being able to provide food to this community. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilor Gary?
Nothing at this time.
Very good. We're going to move on to the city manager's report. Mr. Creighton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I appreciate on behalf of the staff your continued support of staff. The comments the mayor made earlier, I think you're all aware of the work that our staff are doing. It really is impressive. Doesn't surprise me, having worked with these folks for over 3 years now, but you can be proud of the work that is being done by people who work for the city, the Auburn team, as we like to say, Team Auburn. Throughout the organization, everybody's, I think, doing a really good job stepping up. And thank you for your leadership and your support. We're busy. I can't wait to go back to the office. It's a very busy time, believe it or not. I had 10 Zoom meetings on one day, so it's just amazing. But we're all working hard, trying to move the city forward, and obviously there's a lot going on. So thank you for your support, and look forward to continuing this work.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Eastman, Finance, report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. You have the March 31st report. Looked pretty good, actually. The revenue for the current tax revenue is at 94.58%, which is right where it was last year. So that makes me feel good. And we did extend the due date to April 1st. We did, the staff sent out reminder notices at the end of April, last week, to remind people if they hadn't paid their taxes before the lien notices go out, because we like to let them know ahead of time. Sometimes if the property's changed hands, or just they forgot. We had somebody just totally forget. We like to get them before we get extra fees on there, because as soon as the lien notices go out, they get extra fees. They get certified mail fees, and it's another $3 or $13 added on top. So we'd like to let them know ahead of time so that if they can take care of it, they do. The excise tax at the end of March was doing well. It slowed down, and I can tell you I ran a bunch of reports today, and of course the month of April we've been closed the whole time. However, staff has been working with people if they needed to register their cars. We did that, and we've been doing it through the mail. But the governors or the state gave them a grace period. So I think we'll see probably once things get opened back up, we'll see that go up again. I mean, I think depending on when that happens, we'll get that money eventually. It just may not be by the end of this fiscal year, depending on when we open back up. As far as the expenditures are concerned, I don't see anything that sticks out at me that says we shouldn't, or where we shouldn't be. And I also ran that report today as well. All the operating departments are below where they would normally be this time of the year. So people are being careful about purchases. They're only doing things that they absolutely have to have. So The discretionary spending is on hold right now. And I will continue to monitor it as I always do. If anyone has questions, I'd be glad to answer them if I can.
So, Jill, if I could start off, thank you very much for that report. I mean, that's considering that is inclusive of the end of March or the entire calendar month of March. I share your kind of enthusiasm a little bit with that. I mean, and you're just saying you're checking data even today, and we're almost at the end of April. Have you done a forecast at the end of the fiscal year yet, looking at run rates for March and April as kind of your gauge?
I have not. I'd kind of like to wait till the end of April since we were totally closed in April. And see, and not knowing how quickly we're gonna be able to open back up. We will take a hit for this year's. I mean, excise is probably our biggest revenue, and we were ahead of the game to start with when we started with before the COVID. So we had a little cushion there. And like I said, we'll eventually get that money because even though they've extended it for people, they still are going to have to pay their excise tax. And it's going to go back to that date, their original date. So we will get that money eventually. It just depends on how long they get for a grace period.
But you are working with the public right now on a new vehicle or a used vehicle purchase to register that vehicle? I've had
Yes, we are. Yeah. And some people just want to register their cars anyway because they don't feel comfortable driving without the proper registrations. And so we're doing those as well.
Those are great residents. Those are good people. Always following the law. Okay. Do we have any other questions on finance? I'd like to look at it. Maybe if we can get once April closes out, if we can look at some forecasting, Mr. Manager.
Yeah.
The council probably by the mid-May meeting. Give us an idea of the last month and a half of the fiscal.
Sure.
Be great. Thank you very much, then. If there's nothing else, I will accept a motion to accept the finance report for the month of March 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Carrier and our second from Councilor Walker. All those, excuse me. Clerk, for a roll call vote, please.
Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
and Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
Okay, well, I vote of 7-0. We accepted the finance report for March 2020.
Mr. Mayor, I got a question for the manager. Mr. Manager, I'm sure you've been thinking about it, but now it's all over the news that we're probably going to be coming into a shortfall of food on the market, probably meats, maybe in the pig pot first. But anyways, I'm sure you're thinking about it, but how do you think we are going to, as councilors and the manager of the city, how are we going to approach this? There's going to be people down the road. Not only are we going to worry about can we feed people, but they're going to worry about being able to buy food from the markets. And I really believe it's going to happen. I believe you're going to see most meats are going to really be hard to get a hold of as we move into the summer.
Council, that's a good question. The good thing that we have as a city, among others, is we have good partnerships in the community with different organizations. And I know in my conversations with the assistant city manager and others, we've been talking about what we need to do. And the recovery team is looking at various issues as well. I think we need to work with those organizations and entities and make that part of our recovery team.
Councilor Bob, it's a conversation. I just want to be respectful of the fact that it's not on the agenda. At this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to call for an adjournment, but then open this up for a workshop discussion post adjournment. Okay. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion to adjourn from Councilor Ozonian, a second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained, none being. We now stand adjourned for the meeting, but I will open this up to a continuation of our earlier workshop. Councilor Boss.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, as Councilor Lasagna mentioned earlier, our local farms are a great resource, and if we're worried about meat, they have it. Good local organic meat.
Do they?
Yes, they do. That's all I've ever bought.
Well, I will say that I'd like to get that information out to the public. There's one thing that's bothersome. Auburn Maine has had a food insecurity percentage of close to 18%, significantly higher than the county and the state. And locally produced food from reputable sources in Auburn is very hard for a complete diet. I mean, we know about Bell Farms, North Dairy, but that's a wholesale operation, we believe. Ricker Hill Orchard has some produce as well. A comprehensive list of local foods and how to contact them might be a good thing for the recovery team to do, because I did not know of all of them.
Mr. Mayor, it's in the paper every day.
I don't get the paper every day.
I'm just saying all the farms that are offering this every day, and you can call up and order, and you can have a box dropped off at your house, or you can go pick it up. It's really, as I mentioned earlier tonight, it's a very robust system. Their farms, small farms, they're saying they're doing better than ever because of this, and they have access to pretty much everything, including some farms that have things like toilet paper that they're able to sell. But it's in the paper every day.
Could we get that link onto our COVID-19 recovery site for those of us who don't get the paper?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, so I was just.
Councilor Boss, I'm totally 100% agree with you on any kind of initiatives that we can do, because I agree with Councilor Walker. I do think we're going to have supply chain issues from this lockdown. And so if we can create that strong network locally, I'm 100% in on that.
I'm glad to hear it. It's a good opportunity to not only get our, the food that we need, support local businesses, but we're creating a stronger local food economy by doing it. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be shopping locally. It keeps stimulus money locally as well. So it's there's a lot of good reasons. So I'm glad to hear your support.
Absolutely.
Pretty good reasons to actually expand the amount of agricultural enterprise we have in Auburn too.
Mm-hmm. You betcha.
We'll have to look at how to do that again. Is there anything else on this topic? And I'll tell people, do not hoard food. Do not go and clean out BJ's because Councilor Walker says there's not going to be pork chops next week. Don't do that. If everybody is just conservative with their purchases, then we're going to make that supply chain stress less. Don't hoard.
You can get half a pig right now from a local farmer.
Unfortunately, looking at some of our data, average Auburn family can't afford that. I think that's where we're coming down to. What we've noticed at the grab and go food distribution site and talking to folks, it is really almost a weekly process. Money comes in, food's purchased. The ability for the average Auburn resident to stockpile a half a pig, A, do they have the resources, i.e. the freezers, or B, do they have the upfront capital, is diminished. So, I would, trust me, it's something that I've looked at doing, but I don't have the resources per se, or the infrastructure internally. Councilor Gary, you had something on that?
Yes. With this crisis happening, there's a lot of goods we've been buying at the store that's gone up in prices, not just food. So if you have to buy like toilet paper or sanitizer, that goes a lot of your budget. So you have to try to figure out, are you going to be able to buy your groceries? Are you going to be able to get the disinfectants and things you need? And you're right. The grab and go project is phenomenal. It doesn't just feed just seniors and some of the seniors' families, but it's also feeding the PAL Center's families. And there are well over 150 people, adults as well as kids. So it's amazing what the city and volunteers have done there. I myself take at least a dozen dinners over to Barker twice a week. And I'm willing to take dinners any place else I'm asked to take them.
Very good. Is there anything else? I mean, we started off on food or supply chain.
have a quick one if you don't mind. I've talked to most of you individually and some of you in group together. I'm still wanting to make sure that we're of a like mind going forward with the school budget. As the city manager has put out, the expectation is 0. What we had put out last week to the superintendent is that the budget be at 0 or keeping it to the $24 range. But we want to do that with a loss of as few teachers as possible, even going into the administrative task, not the task, but the administrative staff. Teachers are the absolutely last thing that would be touched when it comes to the school budget. We pretty much still in agreement with that.
Is this a discussion or?
Yes, I want your opinion because I take the council's wishes back to the school committee. So this is your part where you get to say something about, what I'm imparting to them. What I've been telling them is that, teachers are the very last thing to go, that we look at every other category before we look at teachers.
Let me say this. So we can't, in this setting, we can't adjust or modify our official communication with the school committee,
Right.
which actually wasn't even 0. It was, I believe, $430,000 of levy. That was some weeks ago. The school committee came forth with a further decrease to 0 on the tax levy. So our communication can't be modified during this format. But ideas, to second what Councilor Carrier is saying, any ideas, wishes from individual councilors, not representative of the entire council body, can be conveyed and made, because you are, at the end of the day, you are still a resident. So I'll just give you those directions before you respond to Councilor Carrier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, to what you're saying, 0 teachers should be even remotely close to losing their position. Anyone that has direct involvement with students shouldn't be on the block at all. Again, personal opinion as a resident, that is the teachers are the ones who are in the classroom every day dealing with the students and education and all that stuff. That's where the line is drawn in my personal residence of that line of the budget. Everything else you said is correct, though.
As a personal resident, I agree with what Tim said. The student interfacing folks should be the very last. If they are interfacing with the students, and I include the administration that are interfacing with the students, would also be last on the admin side in my, just because they're an administrator and a principal doesn't mean that they're not interfacing with students every day. So I consider that a student facing position, if that's. So I agree as a citizen.
Are there any other comments that Councilor Carrier can have so he can present to when they meet on Wednesday?
Just in support of the same concept. As an individual, I support putting teachers and people interfacing with students at the bottom of the list for cuts.
Very good. Okay.
And I have to say, it can be really helpful to talk to a person on the school committee who is in your ward, just to sort of get their input and opinion about how they think it is going. I think that's been really helpful to me.
Counselor, I agree with all of them, except that I hope when we have a new director of the school itself and the way things are done, that they can change it so that maybe we don't need as many teachers coming the following year. It seems like every year there's 3 or 4 new put in this little package somehow, and we keep growing the teachers. And pretty soon, I believe, we'll be teaching 20 kids per classroom. And I don't think the schools are set up for 20 kids per classroom myself personally.
Okay, well, great. Councilor Carrier, how do you feel about that? You got some good takeaway?
Yes, I do.
Okay, outstanding then. Well, if there's nothing further, I'd like to close this workshop and we will reconvene again on May 4th. We'll have more information and directions the next couple of days on location and the technical aspects of that. So thank you.
Mayor, the last thing I'd like to ask is that we don't wait around or play around too long with the money that has been given to us. to help put in a cooler or a walk-in cooler or whatever we're coming up with, and a generator at Pettingill Park, so that we lose another, whatever amount of food that was lost this last time. That money's there. Tomorrow we should be able to find someone that can put us in a generator and put us in a cooler down at Pettingill Park.
Very good then. I will keep that. Absolutely. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night. We'll talk again on the 4th.
Right.
Okay, we're clear.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Christmas.